welcome everybody
Roll call.
to the Sarpy County Board of Equalization meeting. Today's Tuesday, October 25th. It's 3:02 p.m.
No one writes.
Copy of the Nebraska Open Meeting Act is located on the north wall. We'll hold the meeting in accordance with those rules.
Don't leave me.
Present today, we have all 5 commissioners: Commissioner Burmeister, Commissioner Klug,
Okay, hold on.
Commissioner Warren, Commissioner Mixon, and I'm Commissioner Kelly. We also have our Deputy County Administrator, Scott Bovick, at the helm today. Our County Administrator's on vacation. Our County Clerk and Register of Deeds, Deb Houghtaling, is present, along with our County Assessor, Dan Pittman, and our County Treasurer, Trace Jones. If you would, silence your cell phones and let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Two items on consent.
Motion to approve.
Second. Motion by Burmeister, second by Commissioner Warren. Discussion? Please vote.
Ayes 5, nays none.
Can we do this later? Annie? Okay. Okay, I'm going to put the Board of Equalization in recess at this time, and we'll pick it back up after the county board meeting for the executive session.
Okay, hold on.
So we're gonna reset here.
5-1.
You want to do 5
approve
first?
Minutes on there.
The minutes.
5.1.
Hold on. Are you going to the next meeting now?
Do you want me to approve the minutes? Would that make you feel better?
It might.
Okay.
Motion,
You would just, Don, if you would just do that much for me.
motion to approve.
Second.
Hold on.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Warren, second by Commissioner Mixon. Discussion? Please vote.
Ayes 4, abstain Klug.
Okay, now can we go in recess? Okay.
That would be wonderful.
I'm sorry, I missed that completely. I'm so excited about our presentation
I
today
can
that I
tell.
wanted to jump right
Okay.
into that Board of Commissioners meeting. So we'll start the Board of Commissioners meeting right now. Today is still the 25th, it's 3:05. Nebraska Open Meeting rules are on the north wall. All 5 commissioners are present, along with our Assistant County Administrator, Scott Bovick, and our County Clerk and Register of Deeds, Deb Houghtaling. First thing we're going to do today is have a presentation. John Cannon, the Executive Director of the Nebraska Association of County Officials, is going to give us an update on what's going on at NACO. He came all the way down from Lincoln for this, so we're glad you're here and welcome.
Thank you. What, come up here?
Yep.
All right. Yeah, I said that it was like coming and walking to church when I walked into this room. I mean, it's a beautiful facility. And actually coming up here now with the lights on me and you guys right there, it's almost like being in a confessional. So, you know,
Have that, John.
take that for what it's worth. So anyway, my name is John Cannon. I'm the Executive Director of Your Nebraska Association of County Officials, otherwise known as NACO. And I want to stress the fact that it is your association. I've told a lot of people all over the state. I have 1,500 bosses that I work for across the state. And so, you know, certainly if you're a county board member, if you've got questions, if there are things that we can help you with, we're going to do that. But also for assessor, clerk, treasurer, register of deeds, all of the row offices, we're there for them as well. And I consider my job to be one of connecting you guys with the resources you need to do your jobs. And so, you know, to that end, we have a software company that provides services to a number of different counties across Nebraska, most of the counties across Nebraska. We have an insurance pool that a lot of county officials make use of. We have a Crackerjack staff. We got a couple of lawyers that answer just about all the questions that most county attorneys don't want to. You know, our deputy director, Candace Meredith, she works really, really hard to make sure that every county in the state is covered. We've got research analyst that puts together a lot of facts and figures for when we go to the legislature. I'm our chief lobbyist and in front of the legislature all the time on issues that concern every Nebraska county. And, and it doesn't matter how big or how small. There are times, obviously, that we say, there are certain counties that are so large that we need to have a different set of rules that govern them. And we usually do that in consultation with Tim Gay, your hired lobbyist, who does an excellent job, and love working with Tim. He's a really good guy. So what I would like to talk to you about are some of the things that are going on at NACO. And this can be as interactive as you'd like it to be, so feel free to ask questions. Happy to have it. First and foremost, like I said, I'm the chief lobbyist for NACO, and so there's a lot of legislative issues that we have to cover on an annual basis and during the legislative session on a daily basis. So inheritance tax is one of the things that always comes up. Don, you and I have had a lot of conversations about the inheritance tax from a philosophical perspective. You and I are not too far different, but from a county business perspective, that's something that we have built into our platform, is that NACO generally supports maintaining the inheritance tax as it is, because it is a source of income for counties. And when you look at the revenue sources that counties have, taking away their secondary revenue source for a lot of counties, and even for a county the size of Sarpy County, it's going to have an effect on the bottom line. Because one of the things that I hear about when elected officials talk to me is they go knocking door to door and they hear about property taxes. Raise your hand if you've heard that one before. And and no one wants their property taxes to go up. And so when you take away a revenue stream from the counties, that's naturally what's going to follow, is that you've got to make it up somewhere. So last year there was legislation that passed, as LB 310. Back of the envelope calculations, we figure that's going to be about a 15% reduction statewide in total inheritance tax collections. That'll be made up through the mechanism that I just described. And so that is what it is. I have every expectation that legislation is probably going to come back next year. So we'll see what happens. And so that's one of the things that we're going to continue to monitor. Second thing I wanted to bring up, it's probably top of mind for a lot of people, was the postcard bill. Raise your hand if you received the pink postcard in the mail. So I'm sure you got a lot of great comments about that. We originally had opposed that bill as LB 644 in committee. For a number of different reasons. We said, look, it comes at the wrong time in the process. It's kind of essentially a lot of work that we're going to do to produce something that's going to get in front of the taxpayer, and we're not sure how much of a difference it's going to make. That thing came whistling out of committee, and so we said our best option is to, instead of having a bill that says every political subdivision that raises their levy more than a penny over the prior year's levy has to send out this postcard, we said, let's see what we can do to make this workable. Let's have a process that goes into place. And we did what we could. Still wasn't a great process, but we had some time to think about it since then, and we've talked to a lot of the stakeholders. We will probably work with Senator Ben Hansen, the person that introduced that legislation, to see about making that a little bit better for our constituents, and perhaps drive them to the meetings where our constituents' voices are going to make the most difference, instead of having a hearing that in the end probably does not make much of a difference. We worked with other vendors across the state because even though NACO owns a software company and we provide service to 69 counties across the state, there are other counties that we can't leave just hanging dry. So we reached out to all the vendors that were there. You guys were in the middle of a conversion, so we didn't get to E-Ring until a little bit later in the process. But we wanted to make sure this was as consistent as possible across the state. Frankly, the fact that the thing didn't fall apart is due in no small part to the many talented programmers that we have in-house, but also worked with other vendors. Any questions so far about legislation? One piece I do want to mention that's been brought up before, and it's called a consumption tax. Senator Erdman from Bayard, Nebraska, has been a big proponent of this sort of thing. We have been largely out of that conversation, mostly because it's been presented in the form of a constitutional amendment, and we generally don't get involved in those, because once you do, someone that's for or against whatever that proposition is, they usually come and say, would you like to donate to our cause to either make sure it's defeated or it's approved at the ballot box. But generally speaking, the way that we view it, and I personally view it, and I think the NACO board has viewed it, is a consumption tax would replace, the way that Senator Erdman has devised it, it would replace property income sales taxes, inheritance taxes, basically every tax across the board. And you would replace that with one consumption tax upon any ultimate consumption of a good or service across the state. And so there's a lot of exemptions that would go away. A lot of things that you're not taxed upon now, such as food, like groceries, going to get a massage, getting a suntan or anything like that, those sorts of things would have a tax on them as well, a consumption tax. And all that money would go to Lincoln, and then someone in Lincoln is going to decide how much goes out to the local political subdivisions and whether or not they meet their budget. From our perspective, by virtue of the fact that we're sending, and I've heard this one before, we send all of our money to either Lincoln or to Washington, and we don't get the same value back in return. And don't tell me if you've heard that one too, but I bet most of you have. What we would be doing is we'd be sending all of our tax money to Lincoln, and we would be expecting to get that all of a sudden that equation is going to change, that we're going to get the similar value back as we have currently. We think that local control is an important thing, and doing something like sending all of our money to Lincoln is going to take away local control. The way I like to phrase it is, how many of you are you familiar with TIOSA? I'm not going to ask you how many of you know TIOSA, because no one does. But what TIOSA does is it's created a lot of disparity across the state. There are, out of 255 school districts in the state of Nebraska, there are only 80 of them that receive equalization aid from the state. Now, you guys are lucky here in Papillion. I'm pretty sure that you get that Papillion La Vista public schools do. But there are a lot of smaller rural schools that do not. And so the way I describe it to people is, if you think TIOSA is working really, really well, then the consumption tax is for you. And usually not a hand in the room says that's what they want. So that's going to return next year. Yes, sir.
What are the chances of something like that gathering momentum?
Well, in 2021, Senator Urban on a first round vote had 23 votes, and you need 25 to get to the second round. This last year he had 19. We'll see what he does next year. I'm certain he's going to have something come up next year. So I don't know that I've got a trend yet. I've got one data point from last year, one data point from this year, and it appears that the numbers have gone down. I've been trying to visit personally with every candidate for legislature that's up this year, and say, here's how we view it. And I have nothing against Senator Urban. He's, former Morrill County Commissioner. He's former president of the NACO board. He's been around for a long, long time. He used to be on the Bayard School Board. He knows how this stuff works, and he's very, very convinced that this is the way to go. And when I've talked to him, I said, Steve, here's the deal. NACO's never really going to get behind this until and unless you send all the money to the counties first, and then we distribute it to the local political subdivisions, and whatever's left over goes to the state. And he says, well, I don't have the votes for that. I'm like, well, there you go. That's generally the thing, right? Who's the one that's giving and who's the one that's receiving? And as long as we're the ones that are the stuckies, I can't formally endorse anything like that.
Well, just your point, John, of it going to Lincoln, because I don't think the sales tax is ever distributed correctly. It goes to Lincoln, and they really can't, they do not share with any of the, whether it's the cities or, the cities, they really don't share where that money comes from. They just allocate it. I don't know how they allocate it, but it would be interesting to see, because again, your fair share, and again, I don't think everybody is always, you try to make sure everybody's charging the sales tax that they should be charging, but that doesn't always happen either in the distribution.
And Gary, I agree with you. I live in Lincoln, right? If all the tax money in the state's going to Lincoln, that benefit in one way, shape, or form is going to accrue to me. I'd probably reapply for my old job at the Department of Revenue, because all of a sudden those folks are going to be in great shape. But my portfolio is to look after the interests of 93 counties. And I think at the end of the day, once you lose that element of local control, just as a for instance, even if the calculations are correct, we set it at this rate, it's going to bring in the same amount of money that we need to run government all the way across the state. If for whatever reason your projections or your receipts are 10% less than your projections, then that means that everyone that goes in front of the Appropriations Committee, you're going to take a 10% haircut on your budget. Don't like that. The other thing is, if you've got a governor that's sitting in Lincoln, by the way, and has his thumb on the legislature, not necessarily his thumb, but the current one certainly has some influence on the legislature. And if you have a governor in a future year that says, we really need a $250 million prison, everyone else gets a haircut to accommodate that. So I agree with you. The way that it's distributed right now, it's always going to be distributed based on state priorities. And from my point of view, the state is not just this one entity. I look at it as there are 93 distinct communities that have said, we want to be our own county, for what it's worth. And my friend Lynn Rex from the League of Municipalities, she said, no, we've got 527 distinct communities, and she calls them cities, but the semantics really. But the state looks at it as we're going to do distribution that's going to be for the good of the state, and they're not necessarily looking at those individual communities. And that's one of the, philosophically, that's one of the fundamental problems I have with doing something like that.
Have they ever looked to see what it would look like if the money was kept in the subdivisions where it was, or the political subdivisions where it was spent?
Well,
To see if that kind of equalizes things without it
that
being consolidated in Lincoln?
They do, and the issue that you run into is that there are a whole bunch of places in primarily rural, mostly western Nebraska that I can tell you, Banner County, there is a coffee shop. That is the only commercial activity they have out there.
Gotcha.
They're going to be in big trouble. And oh, by the way, and there are lots of people that I've talked to. They said, well, and I've talked to senators who have said we need to consolidate counties. And I have two responses for them. I said, well, one, we could take the first consolidation we could make would be the geographically smallest counties in the state, which, oh, by the way, are Sarpy and Douglas. That ain't going to fly. The other thing I usually say is, if you want to talk about consolidation, you're not really saving anything because you still have the same miles of roads, you still have the same numbers of bridges, you still have the same number of parcels that you need to go appraise, you still have the same sort of duties that counties have to undertake. And so consolidating counties isn't really the answer as far as I'm concerned. But when they do look at those sorts of things, yeah, if you're going to base it on commercial activity, there are a lot of counties that would be in really big trouble. Any other questions on the consumption tax? I hope I've not beat that over the head too much, and so I'll move on to something slightly more interesting and less depressing for me. So anyway, I mentioned legislation, and the reason is if you've ever thought to yourself, boy, there ought to be a law, I've got some ideas of my own I'd like to bring forward. Boy, do I have a deal for you. Gary's going to be at our legislative conference this Friday, which we have. I'd certainly invite anyone in the room to attend that if you got ideas that you would like the NACO board to consider. At our legislative conference, what we typically do is we have presentations made from all of the row offices, assessor, clerk, treasurer, sheriff, all of them. They have an opportunity to say, here are our priorities coming into the current session. County board members certainly have the opportunity to bring those sorts of issues forward as well, and we try to formalize that a little bit. And what happens then is the NACO board goes through a whole raft of proposals we have in front of us. We go through them individually as a board, and the board ultimately makes a decision. Here are our priorities for the upcoming session. We've tried to traditionally have it between 5 and 10 priorities. I can tell you that right now the list that we have to put in front of the board, cover your ears, Gary, you don't want to hear this. We have 25 proposals we're going to put in front of the board. So we've got to try and pare that down. That'll be super exciting. So hopefully, Gary, I've got it a little bit, that list is a little bit shorter by the time you get to Gary. So, but that is something I'd certainly invite anybody in the room to come participate in. I know that there's a member of the State Bar Association's legislative committee that's sitting here today, and certainly, Angie, would love to have your input on some of the things that are going to be in front of the NACO board. But then I wouldn't know if the Bar Association has a mole inside of NACO or if NACO has a mole inside the bar. So, you have to talk about that one a little bit more as well. In addition to the legislative conference upcoming, we have our annual conference that'll be in Kearney from December 14 through 16. We've got some great speakers. The outgoing governor, the current governor, Governor Ricketts, is going to address our opening session on Wednesday. We've got a gentleman who's the executive director of Mount Vernon that's going to come and visit us. He's going to talk to us about George Washington and leadership, which I think is that's probably a good message for everybody to hear, and certainly in the current times that we've got. And then we have a commitment from both of the major gubernatorial candidates that whomever wins, that one of them, that the winner is going to address our closing session, our business meeting, on Friday the 16th. So we've got some great speakers lined up. We've got a lot of really, really good education. I would encourage any and all of you to look at the agenda that we've got and see if there's anything that interests you. I think that there's really something for everybody. And so big county, small county, medium county, I think it's going to be a really good deal for everyone. I do have to mention, because Candace Meredith, our deputy director, makes me mention this every time. Earlier this year, we'd asked for recipes for our cookbook that we're going to be selling and distributing at the annual conference. There's actually a lot of really good recipes. I've already tried a few. I've probably gained about 5 pounds in the last month. But we'll be doing that as a fundraiser for some of the folks that have lost lives and property through the wildfires in the western part of the state. The other thing I will mention is that we have approved CLE from the MCLE Commission from the Supreme Court for the attorneys. I want to say it's about 12 hours that we have approved. So county attorney, Angie, anyone that's an attorney, that would be eligible for continuing legal education. some of the things that we've been doing at NACO. So last year, I became the executive director in February of 2021, and I went to the board and I said, hey, look, I'm new. I'm coming in the footsteps of Larry Dix. The guy's, he built NACO into really kind of the powerhouse that it is. I'm just a kid. You guys shouldn't trust me to walk across the street. And so, and please don't take it back to the board, Gary. But I said, let's undertake a study and see what sorts of things we want NACO to do. And so we looked at, and primarily we're looking at it from the software company standpoint. We looked at a number of different things, put it in front of the MIPS board, and then ultimately presented to the NACO board. We talked about things like cybersecurity. We talked about GIS. We talked about mass appraisal. We talked about a number of other things, certain lines of business that NACO should indulge in order to support county government. And ultimately, when we presented a list to the NACO board, and Gary, as I recall, the NACO board said yes. And I said, no, you guys need to prioritize this for us. And one of our commissioners sitting on the NACO board said, you guys are doing fine. Just here are the main priorities, but just knock out the rest of them as you can. And that was very, very daunting to me. And one of the things that we said at the end of that conversation was, that's great. And if you want us to be all things to all people, we can certainly try. We're not going to pledge success. But if that's the case, then while NACO always has to be in Lincoln because of the giant building that's catty corner from where we sit, we can't just be in Lincoln. And we put it in front of the NACO board. The board said, yeah, sounds like a good idea. Go for it. If you think of the state of Nebraska like a giant tent, with one of the tent poles in Lincoln, one of the other tent poles should be out west. And so the board had approved for us to go out and purchase a parcel of land just north of Ogallala, between Ogallala and Lake McConaughey. And we've selected an architect, and we're going to break ground probably next spring to build an office building out there. There's a lot of stuff that we do in order for us to project our resources across the state. Instead of having everyone start their day in Lincoln and spread out as they can, we'll be able to devote some resources to that western part of the state, and which means one of the side benefits is that for folks in the eastern part of the state, the folks that are in the home office will be able to project those resources instead of having to pick and choose between which half of the state we're going to on that particular day. I think it's a good thing for 93 counties. I think it's a good thing for the state. I think it's a good thing for NACO as an organization. So, and as I recall, the vote was unanimous. So if you don't like it, you know who to blame. A couple other things I did want to talk about. We've got some working groups that we've had. As you know, with ARPA, there's a huge influx of funds that have been coming to counties across the state. And so one of the things we have is a transportation bipartisan infrastructure law. We're looking at ways of distributing those, what are some ways that we can bundle, applications for grants with some of the tranches of ARPA that are outside of what the counties received. We've been looking at advisory committees for, advising different counties across the state. Here's the best way that you can apply for these sorts of things and how you could administer those funds. And so if you're interested in any of those sorts of things, please let me know. We also have a working group on what we started off calling a 10 and 30 plan. It was a 10 and 30 year look at what's going on in county government, what it's going to look like 2030, what's it going to look like in 2050. They changed the name to the county toolkit, which I didn't approve of. So you can blame Candace. You can see that she's got a lot more control over things than I do. But really what it is it's designed to say, what is county government going to look like in the future? And I would love it if every county in the state had a boardroom that was as nice as this. That'd be kind of cool, a really good start. But when you look at the structure of county government, how we fit in with the state and the federal governments, it's probably going to change just based on the world we live in. I know that most of you guys have one of these sorts of things, and that is where a lot of our constituents are looking to get information, looking to be able to pay bills and all those sorts of things. And so anything that we can do to make county government more available to our citizens, that's what we're working towards. So that is something that we're working on. And then as far as ARPA is concerned, and this will be a shameless plug for the National Association of Counties, they're not paying me for anything, but there was a lot of money that came to the state of Nebraska, just as a result of ARPA. I think it was about $600 million distributed to 93 counties statewide. I'm probably going to have that number. That number is almost certainly wrong. I'm just kind of babbling on at this point. But one thing I will say is that if you took I've got the number written down, the $36,360,628 that Sarpy County received, and you divide it by the $2,743 that you guys pay for your National Association annual membership dues, that would pay for 13,255 years of membership in the National Association of Counties. That's a pretty good deal. And so, again, they're not paying me, but I am suggesting to you that your membership in the National Association of Counties has been beneficial to Sarpy County. When ARPA was first described, when they first knew they were going to have a second, essentially, the spigot was going to be turned on a second time, everyone knew that we wanted that to be a direct allocation to the counties after what happened with the CARES Act. The National Association worked hand in glove with Congress, both parts of Congress. They worked hand in glove with the U.S. Treasury Department to make sure that that allocation was directly to the counties. It was done as efficiently as possible. And of course, when you talk about government being efficient, particularly the federal government being efficient, you're always going to lack a certain something. But I think they did do a very good job of getting those monies out to the counties where it should have been in the first place. So that's my plug for the National Association. I don't have too much else as far as what's going on currently. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
John, I know Candace had a number. I was just wondering if you would happen to have this with you on the postcards. How much? Because I know a lot of it was completed by the state of Nebraska, or right. I know the bigger counties did it on their own, but in Senator Hansen, who had sponsored the bill and everything, it's just kind of curious to see how much money is being spent on the postcard. Again, that's all going to be taxpayer money.
Sure.
But is it worth it? I mean, and I'm not here to speak for or against the meetings. I mean, and I know there are different meetings, had different problems, et cetera. But for the most part, I heard it actually went fairly well. But I'm just curious on, because that was, I know that was a concern when we were looking at this before it actually was passed. Okay, how much is this going to cost, and really is it worth the money?
So what I can tell you is that each individual postcard cost 50.15 cents when it went through the state print shop. I'm assuming that the 3 counties that did not go through the state print shop, that would be Douglas County, Blaine County for some reason, and I think Kepaha was the other one. I'm assuming that their costs were going to be roughly the same. We know that there were probably about, I think I've got my math right, about 1.7 million postcards that were produced total. And so when I do the math in my head, $850 grand is roughly what we're expecting. Now, that's including some reprints that had to occur. I'm sure you guys all read the World Herald, and I won't talk about the county to the north, but they had an issue where they had to reprint everything. That's including those reprints, and so presumably, if there hadn't been any reprints, that number would have been a little bit reduced. But you're still talking about, on a good day, it was going to be no less than $650 grand, and where we stand now, we figure that roughly $850,000 is what we spent statewide. So for our purposes, one of the things that we had suggested a long time ago is if we're going to spend that kind of money on these postcards to notify people of here's what political subdivisions are doing, it seems like it would be a lot better that if we want to drive people to the budget hearings, which is where their voice can be heard, then let's just do that. And so we're going to visit with Senator Hansen, and we're going to make that suggestion. There are ways that we could improve that process. The only problem is that the bill that was presented was you have to have this joint public hearing, and it's going to be in such and such a time frame. And so when we entered and engaged in that discussion about how to make it better, we were really only working with a very narrow window. And so I think that if we're engaged more from the beginning of the process, I think we can suggest something that's a little bit better. And on the issue of advocacy, by the way, one thing I do want to mention to particularly the 5 people standing in front of me, but also to all the people that are in the room, and that is on advocacy. And the thing that I would like to mention is that you all, as a group, collectively across the state, county officials received 4.2 million votes in the last 4 years. There's nobody else in the state, no other group in the state, no single individual that can boast those kind of numbers. Now, and I know that we've got in Sarpy County, you've got 50,000 people that vote for the assessor, 50,000 people that vote for the clerk, 50,000 people that vote for the treasurer. But those are votes. Those are votes for people that people are casting for the people that they're having govern them. And I've said it to a million times before that county government is the closest form of government that we have to our citizens. And that 4.2 million number is, it's kind of the proof of that. And I know that in Sarpy, I think everybody here, each of you received more votes than than your senators that are representing Sarpy County. I think that's pretty powerful stuff. And so, as charming as I think I am when I'm over in the legislature and I'm visiting them with senators in the lobby, really what's going to make most of the difference is when they talk to each of you and the 5 folks in front of me and everyone else in the courthouse. There have been so many times that I've had a conversation that starts off with a state senator when they say, I already talked to my assessor, I already talked to my clerk, I already talked to my board member, and I know the conversation is going to go well at that point because they recognize the fact that you guys, I mean, in many cases, you're getting more votes than they are, and they'd be fools to not to listen to that. So I do want to put that pitch out there. You guys are going to make an incredible difference when it comes to your delegation in Sarpy County, but really any other state senator that's out there. And I just, as great as I might think I am, and you know, I've got a mom, I've got a wife, and I've got a daughter that tell me I'm not as great as I think I am. But you guys are going to make much more of a difference than ever I can. So I want to leave you with that.
Well, thanks so much, John. In the 50-meter target, you know, we're going to gather with the Lancaster and Douglas County in November, and I'm sure we'd appreciate your presence there for our Tri-County meeting. I think it's November 16th. So if you don't have that information, we'll get it to you. But we're going to meet out at Werner Park.
Awesome.
So look forward to that meeting, and we're going to see if we can find some common ground on some of the legislative issues. And by that point, you'll have your priorities set at NACO as well. I guess the last thing I'd say before you depart is one of the things that really helps us down here at the county level is frequent updates on legislation, because it changes every hour, basically.
Yeah.
So there's going to be some real key bills that you're going to be tracking. There's going to be several we're going to be tracking. Once we know what those are, we're going to make sure you're aware of them as well. But yeah, those frequent updates of what's going on, you know, inside the rotunda, so to speak. The chatter you're hearing is very helpful for us down here to strategize our approach.
And yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure to provide that. We do have a couple of more traditional avenues. We have a legislative newsletter that comes out via email, if you'd like to sign up for that. We have a YouTube channel where you know, we do a kind of a video report of that week's goings on in the legislature. Good. If you subscribe to that. And I'm available by call or text anytime. I think all of you have my cell phone number. And for what it's worth, I've taken phone calls at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night, and it's cool because my wife is taking phone calls at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night. So if you ever want to get a hold of me, and Donna, you and I have talked on the phone several times, Gary, you and I have talked on the phone several times at night, I'm happy to do so. Because that, again, I'll go back to what I led with. I am your employee. And so if there are things that you want to talk about legislatively or anything else related to county government, you know, pick up the phone. I'm happy to talk to you.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John. Okay. Commissioners' comments?
None, thanks.
No, thank you. No comment.
No comment.
Okay, great. Now we'll get right into the consent agenda. Looks like we have 2 items on
Motion
the
to
consent.
approve.
Second.
Okay, motion by Burmeister, second by Commissioner Klug. Discussion? Please vote.
Ayes 5, nays none.
First item on the regular agenda is the minutes from our October 18th meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Klug, second by Commissioner Burmeister. Discussion?
I'll abstain on the vote.
Okay. Thank
Please
you.
vote.
Ayes 4, abstain Klug.
Okay, item 6.2 is resolution 274. It's a service agreement with Tyler Technologies through Sourcewell for enterprise jury manager software for a 3-year term in the amount of $103,000 and change. Dory Heath, Clerk of the
Commissioners,
District Court.
we are excited to work with Tyler Tech to implement a comprehensive but still user-friendly jury management system. The system streamlines the jury selection process substantially and allows us to provide a better experience for jurors. It also helps us to better share information among court staff, making sure we are always up to date on case information. Sarpy County's current system is antiquated, and the workload required to manage it is becoming overwhelming for such a fast-growing county. The county needs a quick and efficient system for the district clerk staff to satisfy the jury needs of the 7 courts they serve. As the request for jurors began to exceed the maximum capacity of Sarpy County's jury rooms, a change became paramount. The county is a longtime user of Tyler Solutions with our munis accounting processes, and we turn to Tyler for its jury management expertise to find solutions to minimize the cost of an infrastructure expansion that would ultimately fall to the taxpayers to fund. Tyler Enterprise Jury Manager enables Sarpy County District Court to simplify the entire jury selection process. Prospective jurors will complete and send the jury questionnaires by email. Our office will contact jurors via email or text messages and remind them of their upcoming jury duty. Staff can easily alert them of any changes in status, such as weather cancellations, cases that are settled, or changes due to COVID-19 safety protocols. And if a juror gets dismissed early, a real-time text notification can let the juror know before they make the trip to the courtroom. For court staff, the solution allows them to see excuses, requests, exemptions, or restrictions for a potential juror well in advance. With additional information provided up front, there is less paperwork to be filled out the day of the jury service. Additionally, the implementation of Tyler Jury Manager allows my office to manage all parts of the jury operation in one platform, including tracking, organizing, and managing jurors, easily sharing information with justice partners like prosecutors, public defenders, and private attorneys, automating courtroom tasks and organizing the high volume of information from multiple sources, reduce costs and add efficiencies, ability to have secure access to critical case information from the judge's bench, ability to change the payment method to jurors by streamlining processes and reducing costs. Processing and balancing checks is labor-intensive. A portion of the software project will utilize an integrated third-party payment system to make this more efficient, and which will positively impact the county clerk's office. Over the past 4 years, my office has been an innovator in how we use technology to improve our operations, so it's no surprise we will take the same approach to jury management. We are pleased to implement Tyler Enterprise Jury Manager to help the county move forward with virtual and in-person jury notifications. For such a rapidly growing county, the solution will manage everything related to jury operations and bring many efficiencies to my office, other staff, judges, attorneys, bailiffs, and the county clerk. In our view, Tyler Tech has the strongest solution for jury management in the market, and we look forward to being able to make Sarpy County's jury operations more efficient with our new jury management system. Thank you.
Do you know, is this what the federal court uses, or do you know what they use out of
I do
curiosity?
not know what they use.
Okay, I just was called for jury duty for the first time ever, and I have not been called to a trial, and I'm in my last weeks, but they have an online system as well. I was just curious if it was the same.
So how did they initially contact you?
I got a postcard,
Okay.
and then it's checking a status online each week, which is better in my opinion than a phone call.
Definitely.
Or showing up somewhere, but yeah.
Right.
I was hoping to be called though, but.
We've had some jurors be frustrated because it's after 5 o'clock and they just get an automated message. So then they still don't know.
So this system pushes out information to the potential jurists so they don't have to call?
Yes. Through text and emails.
That's good.
They'll be very
I
happy.
was on jury duty once, I kept forgetting to call. And then you remember like at 10 o'clock, you go, oh, please, Lord.
Did you get locked up?
I hope I wasn't needed.
Lucky.
So that's good. So like a text message, did you say?
Yes.
Oh, that's very good.
It is. It's a great system.
That's awesome.
Motion to approve. Oh,
Second.
Okay, motion by Burmeister, second by Klug. Discussion? Please vote.
Ayes 5, nays none.
Just as an aside, I had a constituent get a hold of me earlier this year with a situation where her husband was deployed. She had no idea where he was or when he got back, and she had to report to jury duty. She had a language barrier. I visited with her. She didn't know who else to call. They got her in contact with Dory in her office, and immediately the problem was solved. So thank you for serving the constituents of our community.
I had a similar situation. They do a great job down there.
Okay, 6.3, the last item on the board agenda today is Resolution 279. This is a First Amendment to an interlocal cooperation agreement with the city of Springfield that was approved originally in 2020 via Resolution 158 for arterial street improvement program fees collected from Project Gemini to be used for Sarpy County for the cost of future improvements to portions of Capehart Road, 156th Street, and Fairview Road. Increases the total amount to $2,810,000. Scott Bovick.
Thank you, Commissioner. As one of the board's directions to us was to continue to partner with cities and private development on road projects. Remember, a couple years ago, we entered into this agreement with the city of Springfield for them to collect ASIP fees from the Meta development and then remit that to the county. Meta and its development arm, Raven Northbrook, have purchased more property, and so the city of Springfield was willing to extend our agreement to this additional property, and that would bring their contribution up to close to $3 million for the road network in that area. In the next few weeks, we've been working with the county engineer's office to get an engineering firm on board to kind of look at that entire network of roads, because development is continuing to happen out there. So in a few weeks, you'll have that agreement on your agenda to keep working with the city of Springfield and the city of Papillion and those private developments to make sure that we are ahead of the game as that area continues to grow and expand with the sewer opening that area. So with that, I can answer any questions.
Questions for Scott?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Warren, second by Mixon. Any further comments or questions? Please vote.
Ayes 5, nays none.
Okay, all agenda items having been addressed as published, the Board of Commissioners is adjourned. And we will jump back into our Board of Equalization meeting at item 6.1.
Give me 1 minute here. Okay.
For the protection of the public interest, I move we go into executive session to discuss pending litigation.
Second.
Motion by Burmeister, second by, I heard Commissioner Mixon.
Well, Klug got in there.
Let's have an arm
All
wrestle
right.
for it.
Oh, Commissioner Klug. Please vote.
Ayes 5, nays none. Okay.
Okay, it's now 3:46. We're going to go into executive session where our discussion will be restricted to pending litigation. It's now 3:59. At 3:46, we went into executive session where our discussion was restricted to litigation, pending litigation. Need a motion that.
Motion to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion by Warren, second by Mixon to return to the regular session. Please vote.
Ayes 5, nays none.
Okay, all agenda items having been addressed as published, the Board of Equalization is adjourned.